Start. So I'm really happy to be one of the moderators of this fantastic panel here. We have from our earlier presentations this day a bunch of industry representatives, people from research here too as well, to talk to about sustainable ICT and whatever that means. In particular, in order of the presentations earlier. So we have Thomas Walewyns from Walewyns. Hi Thomas, nice to see you again. We have Frédéric Descamps from Google Belgium. We have, I have to look it up, otherwise I get the names wrong. Huh? We have Tom Greenwood from Whole Grain, and it's not about food, it's about Whole Grain Digital. Then we have Marina Proske from Fraunhofer IZM. And are you actually affiliated with Fairphone, or is it only Fraunhofer?
Only Fraunhofer.
Only Fraunhofer, okay. And Lee is not with us anymore, and we still have Guillaume Mandil from G-Scope in Grenoble. Eh?
I am from Grenoble, but no longer from G-Scope.
Okay.
I moved last month.
You moved.
Sorry.
Programs in print tend to be outdated. That's why we need ICT here. So then from the organization side, we have Noémie Bidul here from the University of Louvain as one of the moderators, and I'm Jan Tobias Mühlberg from KU Leuven, from the other Louvain. So yeah, so let's try to entertain you and ask some interesting questions. The process of how we get here was through all of you sitting in separate rooms and thinking about questions that we could ask in this context here that focus on the topics around what sustainability means for the different stakeholders, on what ICT should, shouldn't, can and cannot provide for a better future, and that's roughly the context in which we're operating now. Noémie, I leave it to you for now.
Okay, thank you. So we are going to start with a really broad question so that you can all answer and share your vision before we dive into more details and maybe more specific questions. So one question that our participants had for you was, what is your vision, either as a company or as a researcher or individual, for a sustainable future, and how do you think ICT can or cannot contribute to that? So I don't know who wants to start to answer to this challenging and quite broad question.
I can start if you want.
Thank you, Thomas.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I took a little bit the vision at VOC Sense, especially so when I distinguish the sustainable development and the sustainability, because in my vision, what is required is to put into the market and to develop sustainable things, so the governments, the politics, the people use them in a sustainable world. And that's quite important to separate both, because that's also one of my convictions, is that alone people cannot do many things, or we can only be happy with ourselves, say, okay, we are doing good things. But if the people, if the companies, for example, with VOC Sense, the petrochemical companies, the big industries like the steel industries, stuff like that, are not doing anything for the change, or if they are not, let's say, if it's not mandatory for them to change something, nothing will change. So we need to put the tools on the market, to prepare all the tools and help them with the governments and the politics, so the game can change. So that's a first vision of what we are doing and what we are offering. Of course, actually at VOC Sense we are not so much people to fully analyze our life cycle and so on. So I also put a message, give a message. If people are interested, we are hiring starting from September, so starting from now. So don't hesitate to send message if you want to contribute to a safer and space world. But yeah, we we need to put everything on its way.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. It's nice to hear that you're considering doing including life cycle assessments in your design process, because it was also one of the questions of the participants. So thank you for that. If someone wants to react and share its own vision, maybe.
Sure,
Okay,
I can go.
Tom, as you want.
Yeah. I was just going to say that I think for most of human history, our societies have been sustainable. And it's only in very, very recent history that we've developed a way of living and a way of working that that is extracting far more from the planet than it can sustain, and creating new materials that we have no way of, or currently have no good way of disposing of. So I think looking ahead, humans don't like going backwards. So going back to the sustainable models that we've had for most of human history doesn't really seem like a viable option, and therefore we must look forwards. And I think what ICT offers us is ways of solving the very complex problems, particularly around how do we close the loop on materials, how do we use energy more efficiently, and how do we generate energy in a cleaner way. And we have a choice. We can use ICT for that, to create this sustainable future, or we can use ICT to figure out how we can extract more from the planet and how we can consume the Earth's resources faster, which is what we currently seem to be doing. So my vision is that we shift our focus towards using it to solve the problems rather than create the problems.
Just on the circular economy stuff Tom mentioned, I'm pretty sure it's not enough, okay? Meaning that maybe Jacques Combaz showed you those graphs of circular economy of the world yesterday. I don't know, he likes those graphs very much, so I assume he showed them to you on Monday, but did he? No? Okay, I'll try to show you after. But what this graph is showing is that there is a very limited share of the economy that is actually circular, around 10% at best in 2015. And it has evolved, it has decreased at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution and then increased since the 50s or 60s, I don't remember exactly when. But in any case, if the economy is still growing, being circular is not enough, because if the economy grows by 3% a year, and if the material stays in the economic loop like for 10 years, for example, the total, even if you recycle 100% of what was in the economy, if it has grown for 3% per 10 years, you don't have enough material when recycling 100%. So you are going to use brand new materials. So being circular is not the point. And so from my perspective, what we need to define is really what do we want as a society. And it's not a question of going onward or backwards. We cannot go backwards. We cannot restore dinosaurs or something like that. So we need to define something that goes onward and is inside planetary boundaries. And this is what we need to define first, and then try to use technologies to reach this goal. That's what I think for a sustainable future.
Thank you, Guillaume. Maybe Marina or Frédéric?
Yeah, I could add to that. And yeah, I also think that circular economy and efficiency is not enough. And on the long run, we would need sufficiency. And I hope as a vision that one day ICT can help us to reach sufficiency in production, less products, etc. And I think there are some good approaches regarding sharing economy and so on. But currently, it's just adding on top to the system we already have, and we don't have the system change yet. But on the long run, I would hope that it helps to achieve not only efficiency, but sufficiency.
Now we want the Google vision.
Okay. So my personal impression is that doing what we are doing today will not drive us where we want to be in 20 years, 30 years, okay? And so there's a choice, and everyone can make that choice. You either give up or you fight. And I am a fighter by nature, and so I believe that we need to develop every imagination, everything you believe, every new technology to go where we need to be. And I think our company has been enabling us as just local, small entity of the group to think outside of the box and to help us develop little things. But at the end of the day, it's the same as the YouTube video. It's just a tiny amount of energy. Okay, but if everyone does his share of the work, then we'll be able to achieve something bigger. Give you an example. We were the first data center in Belgium to be built outside the United States. You can imagine the shitstorm that it creates because United States people, they only know their planet is limited to their continent, okay? And so it's been something, a learning curve for them as well to be exposed to global way of thinking, another culture, another time zone and stuff like that. We suffered as well, but still. What I want to say is that you cannot imagine when I have been proposing the solar project to the leadership board that have been visiting muddy, cold, rainy Belgium and say that will pay off. There is a return possible for that kind of project in-house. They were just laughing. And I've been challenged to make sure that what we have been investing is also giving back what we were planning to do. And of course, as a company, an investor, big company, when you do an investment, your return on investment is something like 2 years you need to push. 1 year, it's a no-brainer. They give you the white check immediately. But when you come to 7, 6 years of return, then you know it's a choice. It's a business decision. And we were able to say, okay, if we want to do something, we have been investing into energy saving, PUE, and construction. I think we are not going further enough. And I had Joe Cava say, okay, Fred, I sign off. And he signed off on this one. And then we went with another project, the battery system. And he signed off. So it means that, okay, it's a drop in the ocean, I admit, but it's one drop, and it's an important one. Because we can also share our experience and also make it available for everyone. Because it's the first time data center industry, you need to know that these people typically are dinosaurs. You don't change the process. You don't change the design. You don't change anything because you don't want to take risk to your availability of your system. And so putting something on the heart of the power distribution that will help the grid for a little thing, it's a no way in another conventional company. At Google, we said, yes, we can take the risk and we will do this.
Thank you, Frédéric. I think I have a question to rebound on that. So we sure do acknowledge how all the efforts that Google has made in terms of improving the energy efficiencies of its infrastructure. But during this doctoral school, we have also seen that sometimes optimizing efficiency is not enough because on scope beyond the scope of your infrastructure, you can have like rebound effects because once a technology becomes more energy efficient, it can be overexploited because of the new potential it brings. So one of the questions that the participants had was actually, all of this is taking place in a growth model, like an economic growth model. Like the question of the participant is that maybe is Google investigating other alternative models than these growth model? Because I think a lot of participants here think that even with ICT, if we stay in growth, the economic growth model, we won't be able to meet the urgency of the agreements that we have. So I don't know if this is something you investigate at Google or.
Absolutely, and I think we are based on growth. So it's the growth is the consequence. It's not the objective. So that's something which is kind of different. In my previous company, my main task and my main OKR was how many people can you fire, Fred, on your team? Okay, it's not been that purpose since the 12 years that I joined Google, but it's a consequence of also a move of old habits. You know, I was working in the rubber industry. We had a data center, a small data center. And I can imagine that, you know, I can tell you that the PUE and the amount of equipment that was there up and running using silicon chips and everything with the usage of 5%. It was amazing. So it was a big waste of internal resource. It was one company, 500 employees, but if you replicate that over the world, over the planet, you can feel that, you know, the average usage of CPU on servers is extremely low. And in data centers, I'm not talking only about Google, but all the big players, the objective is to use as much as we can these servers because it's an investment, it's an asset, and the most we can load it, the best it is. And so that's also where we are shifting as well. You're talking about growth. I would close about the move from company-owned data centers, company-owned computing to a cloud organization. And I think we've seen that, you know, I'm old enough, we are old enough to see that in the past when you are about to request an offer, at the beginning you had to send a letter. And then afterward there was a miracle called the telecopy, okay? You were able to send a telecopy and receive telecopy. Today it's an email. Afterwards it was phone calls and telex. So today it's an email. You can see as well that, you know, the effectiveness, not using paper, not transporting paper, not producing the paper, it's a shift. And I agree that we use our phone and we take pictures for anything and everything, and it's probably our problem. We need to be conscious about our footprint in terms of digital footprint, and how can you force people to be conscious about that? One of the steps that I'm making is that instead of having something free, you start paying. And when you start paying, you start to see, yes, probably, you know, that's not needed.
There is an intervention from Thomas.
Yes, indeed. Just wanted to, you're talking about growth, which is a consequence and not an objective. And this is quite strange because the growth is just a consequence of what you decide or what you offer. And you talk about the data center, the servers. If you offer something because you decided, which is less power consuming, more optimized, which is actually better for the future generation and so on, that's your decision. And the consequence will be defined by the people who will use it. But actually, you are at Google or like the other industry where we work with, as I explained, also you can offer something which is a device which is sustainable. But if the company, if the final user don't want to use it, he will not use it. And so you need actually to act directly on the consuming part. And you are just the guy, you are part of the people who can change something with the politics, but it will be either the politics who will say, okay, you will pay taxes and stuff like that if you use too much power or if etc. Or it's up to you to decide to use less power and, for example, just have less server capacity and stuff like that, because then the people will arrange themselves to deal with the offer. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, I'm not following you because honestly, I don't see any business model which would be based on something breaking up. Okay, so you know, it's like a train. Huh? If you know the SNCB, they will, if they see that the trains are overloaded, they will add another train because, as you say, the users are dictating where we want to invest and where we need to invest.
It's not the same. You cannot compare, because what you are comparing now, it's a social stuff. It's just to give access to people to train, to go somewhere. And so it's something social. So it's related to sustainability, because you will help for a better world for the future generation, offering them more training. You always have to think about, and it's the definition that I read again a few days ago when preparing this talk. I read the definition about the sustainability, the sustainable development, and you have to act for the future generation by your choices. And that's important.
I think we are not forced to use renewable power. We have absolutely no incentive to do so. Huh? So these so these are voluntary choices, more expensive, more challenging, inventing first-of-a-kind contracts in an industry which it's almost non-existent. Huh? And when we were saying about we will use renewable, we will use carbon-free energy, then people were saying, yeah, but okay, data centers, they need other systems. They are consuming too much power, and they will be draining all the renewable energy. Huh? So what we do, we invest in new systems producing renewable. So that's creating addition and not stealing what's existing.
Let's first give everyone a chance to intervene here, and I think Tom is next. You're muted.
Thank you. I think it's interesting how very quickly this debate has highlighted that the environmental issues with ICT are not just about the technical hardware itself, and there's a lot of good things happening with, you know, improved efficiency in data centers and networks and software, but there's a huge cultural part of this, both in terms of how culture affects the usage of ICT and how the technology affects the culture in return, and there's a feedback loop there. And I think one of the things we need to be mindful of is that digital technology can be a huge accelerant of consumption. And, you know, so for example, I don't want to pick on Google because I think Google does a lot of good things in the industry, and I think they're taking good leadership on many things. But if we look at the business model, it's, you know, in many ways it's an advertising-driven business model, which the impact of the advertising driving consumption in e-commerce and other services is a huge impact on society at large. That's much bigger than just the pure technical impact.
Okay, Guillaume wants to say something. Yeah. Marina, if you want to intervene, just raise your hand so we see that there's something coming from you.
Yeah, I would like something to add to follow Tom's reasoning, is that this is not only about personal decision. We are living in a society where we have interaction and grouping interaction, and just personal decision and individual decision are not going to be enough to reach even the Paris Agreement, which is maybe not sufficient to reach sustainability. There has been a study in France called, which is called in French faire sa part, which means in English making everyone is share or something like that. And the question was, if everybody is doing as a hero all the small gesture or that he can for environment, would it be enough to reach the Paris Agreement limit? And the answer is actually no, it's not enough. But the good news is that it's about 20% of the effort. So it's not ridiculous. But okay, by single decision, like taking my bike, consuming renewable power, etc., I can make a quarter of the objectives of the Paris Agreement, and all the other, the 3/4, needs political decisions and collective decisions.
Thank you. Marina?
Yeah, I would also say that individual decisions are not enough that we can reach the goals we have, but nevertheless they are important, and a lot of decisions people are not aware of because they've just used using technology, uploading pictures, etc. So a lot of people are just not aware of the footprint they are causing. But nevertheless, I would say it's important to take companies on board and make them act. But as Google is one company here and there are others, there are a lot of companies who are already going beyond what is needed from the regulatory side. And especially regarding green energy, there are some of the big players like Google, like Apple, were going forward and saying, okay, we are purchasing only green energy. And from that side, I would really look towards the regulation side and say, be more ambitious. The companies are doing at the moment a lot more than the European Commission is asking for. And why is the regulation side not more ambitious to force the companies who are not moving by themselves? And yeah, I would really like that there are stricter regulations to achieve that a lot faster.
Thank you, Marina. I have maybe a question for Guillaume to rebound on this. So to summarize what we've said so far, it's as engineers, we have the power to make a technology as clean as possible, as efficient as possible. But as you said in your talk, maybe this is not enough to put the sustainability label on this technology, and probably the real decision could from the societal and the political level. But the questions that the participants had was, as engineers, either in research or in companies, how can we bridge the gap between the engineer bubble, the engineer side thinking about efficiency and these concerns, to go towards the political level? Like, how as engineers can we use our skills to collaborate with the political level and maybe inform them? Or what is your view on this?
This is a difficult question, because I think engineers are kind of people that do stuff, and they are under the constraint of what is asking by the society or the politics, as you said. So, but maybe what can engineers do is try to assess honestly what they are doing and provide figures that are realistic, and try not to bias they figures, and say, okay, consider the full life cycle, consider the induced activity of their businesses. Okay, I mean, I don't believe, for instance, that Google data center environmental impact are direct impact of its data center, but it's more that all the activities that are enabled by the access of Google data center that generates a lot of other activities that generate intern impacts. And so this is more about the systemic organization of the economy than the single impacts of the data center of Google, which is the problem. So as engineer, it's quite complicated, because you need to, we want efficient technology, but we also, to reach sustainability, we also need to limit these kinds of activities, and the limits are more environmental or societal limits. So I don't think engineers are able to state what are the limits, and it's to someone else to figure out, to say, okay, we cannot go upward X gigaton of carbon dioxide emission for ICT or for civil aviation, or I don't know. But and then the work of engineer is to stay beyond the limit, beside the limit, under the limit, below. Sorry. Missed the word.
Yeah, but then the important question is, who defines what are the limits? What are the limits for Belgian industry? What are the limits for Europe? What are the limits for the world? And
for the world, it's quite easy.
For the world, it's easy, yes. But
we have the answer. You read the Planetary Boundaries paper, and you have the answer. And then to allocate these world boundaries to countries, etc., there is a huge political debate. Okay, the COP should be the place where we have those kinds of discussions.
Exactly. Considering historic depths, not considering historic depths, and all these things, yes. And then the interesting question is probably not talking about sustainable ICT, but sustaining a livable future for us, right? And ICT is just one part of that.
I think ICT should be a tool to provide a sustainable future, but it can also be a tool for unsustainable future, depending on what limits we assign to ICT. Okay, if we say there is no limit for ICT because we think technological progress is good in its own, and then you can develop as much ICT as you want, I probably think that it would be an unsustainable ICT, even if it's efficient.
I'd like to quickly come back to Marina. You want to say something anyway, but I put my question first, and then maybe you can answer them both at once. You've been working a lot on these life cycle assessments, so maybe you could share a bit of an information on how difficult these processes actually are and what they bring us at the society. And I'm in particular interested in understanding to what extent other companies can pick up on that, be it for data centers, be it for IoT devices.
Yeah, just quickly regarding the questions of how can engineers be active in that field. Maybe for engineers, it should not always be the question, how can we achieve more while staying within the limits, but how can we improve what we already have by using less? And maybe that's a lot of engineers, at least at our institute, are so technology enthusiasts that they are not considering to not adding more features, to not adding more storage, etc., if it's not actually needed. And that's also, which I think it should, is a change in the thinking of engineers, that more is not always better, especially from the user side. And that's also a specific thing in the life cycle assessment. If you look at life cycle assessments of ICT, it's the parts which are delivering the functionality. So it's processors, it's especially the storage and memory of the devices which drives the environmental impact. So if we can have only use, for example, in a phone, only at the storage capacity which we actually need, then we can reduce the overall impact of the phone and so on. And yeah, it's a difficult topic to achieve up-to-date or to collect up-to-date data on the production of these parts. But there are quite a lot of companies already active in doing life cycle assessments and building on the hotspots analysis. So what are the drivers? Where can we change? Apple and I think also Huawei are publishing carbon footprints for all their smartphones, which they put on the market. So there's some development regarding doing LCAs within the companies, but not so much yet on really reducing the impact built on that on the product side. So they're very active on the side reducing the impact of the company as such, but not yet on the production side, on the product side.
Thank you, Marina. I think Thomas wants to react. You're mute, Thomas. You're still muted, Thomas.
Yes, sorry. So yeah, it's just a quick reaction to Marina and to share my experience with VOC Sense by trying to put new kind of sensors on the industry to offer new product and actually if we face actually major reluctance to change of this industry. I explained that even if we talk about industry 4.0 to have less maintenance, reduce many maintenance costs and so on, you can offer new products with life cycle assessment which are better. But if you cannot fit perfectly the requirement of the industry, of your customer, they will tell you, yeah, okay, but are you sure that it's correctly working? I do prefer the solution of Bosch and Dwagger, where I have a technician which is coming each 2-3 months, and I will say, yeah, but maybe let's try. Okay, now I see, depending on the countries, for example, in the north, in Netherlands, I'm quite sure that in the north of Europe, in Denmark, Sweden, and countries like that, they are more open to the digitalization. It will work because they want to test and try the new things, the new stuff. That's in the Netherlands that we have the most part of our tests and selling the product. In Belgium, for example, a little bit less in France, hopefully, but it's more due to a legal part, which is more strong in France than in Belgium. So the companies are, it's mandatory for them to do tests and control. But yeah, actually, if the people are not convinced that a change is possible, yeah, it will stop there, and you will be with your product with a nice life cycle assessment, with a small footprint, but your product will be never sold, and then you will never have money. So I know that and money is still the earth of the war, and so even for a company, we need that, and at least we can maybe change and have a world with no growth. But let's say actually we still need growth, so we can change it. I hope that it will maybe change. We can say, okay, on the earth we have a total amount of X hundred of trillion euros, but actually everything is based on growth, and so we need to deal with that also. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Okay, I think we're gonna go towards, once again, I think many people here will have something to say on whether we should stay in this growth system or not, but I think we're gonna go towards more specific question. We talk about life cycle assessment and the fact that this should be done in a systemic way and not just looking at one scope. One question that our participants had was towards Google. They were wondering regarding servers and solar panels that are heavily used in your installation. What do you do regarding end of life of such infrastructures?
So for the solar panels, so far we are not there yet. So we expect at least 25 years, and they've been installed in 2017. So. And this is something which was based on the experience as well. So we need to see what is really the value of keeping them longer or not, if they fail or not. The solar panels is one, but also the inverters are also something that companies would be pushing to replace. And I'm not a big fan of this anyway. So I'm for these systems in a data center. To me, we need to wait until they fail, because the cost of maintenance is high. So, the balance that you make to your leadership, saying, you know, it will give me that amount of money so I can invest, will be reduced. So it's just shooting yourself in the foot if you want to push the project. And the second thing, usually when you do maintenance, you break things. For these systems which are not critical, they are an additional to what we do. We don't do maintenance. You know, we do maintenance, regular maintenance and normal maintenance, but we don't do the extra step. For the servers, it's kind of funny because we are always trying to develop in conjunction with the CPU manufacturers, new CPUs. We are offering to really production testing their CPUs. So we are at the beginning of the new area of technology, which is also something that typically critical industry don't do. They want to have something which is sure, which has been proven, which has been having a long tenure. So we don't do that. It means as well that we are starting with the upper level of performance, and when the performance is dropping, and we have some calculations that are made, when we see that the performance is dropping, for instance, if we evaluate that, you know, the cost of replacing the chip is better than to keep the chip running long term, then we will either repurpose the server, because you don't need to have a Ferrari to go and take your bread. So you could use part of the equipment in the servers to repurpose the servers for secondary tasks or tasks that are less used in terms of load balancing. This is one thing we do. And the second thing we do, we recycle them. So we send all the equipment to recycling. And so we try to give a second life first, and then when it's not possible anymore, because things are breaking as well. So this is the job of almost at least more than 50 people on a daily basis in Saint-Guilain, is to fix the servers, because parts are breaking. Like your personal computer, if you have personal computer, after 3 or 4 years, you will have something broken. You can imagine that, you know, when you have hundreds of thousands of servers, you know, this is just a routine stuff. And it's not the same as the one that you open in the morning, you close in the afternoon. In this case, it's 24/7, high level of performance.
Okay, thank you for your answer.
And what I want to say as well is that I want to circle back on adding new stuff just to make it better. Engineers are like that, huh? So we want to improve things, and we want to change the way it's been done. It's probably built in our DNA. We don't know, but it's important to make sure that, for me, it's better to have incremental improvements than a drastic change, because the incremental improvement, you can make it with what you have without spending a lot of energy, without spending a lot of manpower, and this has been proving that. Rethinking about the way you use things, and is there a better way to use the thing you have, the tool you have, is also something which is extremely, with a very quick payback, which is something that can make things very easy. And that's what we did with the effectiveness in data centers. You know, we have been building new data centers, but the existing data centers, they've been dropping as well in terms of PUE. It's not they have been staying at the high bar at the beginning. You know, it's a constant reflection. And when you learn about something, then you try to implement it into the new generation, and then you are reducing, you know, step by step the way you do.
Do you feel like you have a culture where engineers are actively encouraged to propose, you know, sustainability upgrades, changes that lead to longer life cycles, energy savings, whatsoever at Google? And how do you get there?
Yeah, so we have groups, and we encourage the people on the field to propose new stuff. It's becoming more and more difficult because, to a certain extent, in the past, with the global system, with global tools and stuff like that, you know, having a small failure in the data center in Saint-Guilain was not impacting the end user. Today with cloud, these sections are more restricted, which means that it's, you know, we have a higher expectation on availability of each system. But anyway, what we do, we ask to propose things, and we have a group at sustainability who is reviewing each request if they need to be involved. Things that are no-brainer doesn't go there, but when things are a bit borderline, they go there. Just giving an example, we are using evaporative cooling, okay? And to use evaporative cooling, if you want to be efficient in the water usage, you need to control the pH of the water. And in all the industry that I know, what they do to lower the pH, they add sulfuric acid. Sulfuric acid is cheap, plenty of them is available, every company will sell you. So we said that, yeah, what can we do as? So we did something different, and it's only in the data center in Saint-Guilain, is that we add CO2. So it captures CO2 from processes that we put in the water. So basically what we do the same as the Coca-Cola. You know, when you add CO2 in water, your pH is going down. And we do that at an industrial level. And it's been accepted even that the price is almost twice the price of adding sulfuric acid. Because at the end of the day, there was a matrix. The cost was one part of this. Safety, because, you know, having a truck with you know, liquid CO2 with a spill or leak is something. It doesn't hurt people. It doesn't create dangerous atmosphere externally. Having a leak of concentrated sulfuric acid with people, it's something which is extremely dangerous. So all these metrics, they were ranked with some coefficients, and at the end of the day, that solution was the one that was pursued. And sustainability was one of the criteria. And it's been like that we start pushing things that were impossible in the past with the normal way of thinking of industry decision makers, this cost and return of investment. Safety, that was not financial, they don't care about safety, they are not the first in line. So it's a new way of proposing stuff.
And maybe I can add a question. How do we reverse the order? If we want to be sustainability first and then cost fourth, do you have an idea of how to manage this in companies?
I think it's easy to have the balance. At the end of the day, if sustainability typically upfront is costing more for the company, okay? And so if you're rich, you can be extremely sustainable. But then at the end of the day, your service will be more expensive. And then you need to find the customers that are okay to pay the price. So we are the customers, we are the one paying at the end of the day.
Yeah, but in the end, if it's unsustainable, the planet will be unlivable. So how do you...
Too long-term vision for industrials.
Okay, how can we change this? Because this is the problem.
We are the one changing it. We are the one deciding to buy ginseng produced in China. We are the one deciding who gains the market. When we go shopping, and it's okay, it's a drop in the ocean anyway, but it's a lot of drops in the ocean. At the end of the day, you know, if Deleuze here is not selling ginseng other than the bio, they will remove the ginseng from China. They will only offer the bio ginseng. So everyone, we are the one driving the change in company, and company can also help and can also push. But in conventional companies, I can tell you that it's not there yet. And they wait for government to change the rules. And government, they are elected by the people. And so it's all these balance that we need to break. And it will be a difficult one.
Maybe a question on this, sorry, and then I will switch to another speaker. But Google is a big company and a lot of people want to ask you a question. But so we see that aiming for the sustainable option is often a luxury that rich company can afford, but when you're a smaller structure, maybe you cannot always afford to put sustainability before cost. And that reminds me of a question that we had from the participant, which is, in a sense, we can consider that we can a finite amount of resource, like when we speak of renewable, maybe in Belgium, not all companies have the possibility to switch to renewables. So if Google does so by going like 100% renewable, this takes away some potential from other companies to do so. So what do you have to say on this?
Yeah, so I agree. I fully agree with you, and that's the reason why I think our objective is not to steal all the renewable energy which is available, but to create new PPAs. We have been engaging with the wind farms in the North Sea. We've been engaging with other wind farms around Europe, and I agree that, you know, the data center is located in Saint-Guilain, and then if I need to produce all renewable in Saint-Guilain only, that will not be possible. So we need to leverage, you know, exchange from renewable energy, and it's also something which is today extremely difficult, mainly in Belgium and mainly in Wallonia, because we are missing one of the big network in high power network.
I would like to add something on this. Is there anyone who wants to talk? Okay, just a small remark. Building new facilities to produce renewable energy is not going to reduce CO2 emission. If you want to reduce CO2 emission of energy production, you need to close coal power station, you need to close gas power station, but building new one is not the point. You just add them to the grid, and this is not the way of thinking of it. So it's good you build new one, but you also need to think about how to close old one.
Thomas, you wanted to react on to also?
Yeah, I just wanted to react. Not convinced that the sustainable product and device are more expensive, because if you look on most investment funds working with sustainability, sustainable companies and stuff like that, you will see that their growth are quite the best. So it means that, yeah, doing sustainable things, sustainable developments, you will earn money quite easily also. So it means that basically it costs not so much, because investments are growing and you have revenue.
I think we are using the term sustainability almost inflationary throughout this debate. So what I'm really interested in is, from kind of all of you, is to understand what is the thing that you want to sustain. What is it? How do you define it? What is that one objective for your sustainability initiatives? Be it Google data centers, be it sustainable websites, be it Fairphone. I can't get it yet. I can't get my hands on it.
I am not will not say Fairphone is the best things. I am more convinced that if Fairphone is the best, why it's not mandatory to everyone to have a Fairphone? That's more the problem, because once you have a Fairphone, and that's perfect, people are having a Fairphone. I have a Samsung smartphone from now 4 years, so it's quite nice. 4 years with a smartphone. It's not the most important things. The most important things is why isn't not mandatory, or why people need to do by themselves the change, because it's not possible. For example, you have still a plane to go to Lyon in France. Okay, by train, it's the same time. The problem in Belgium also, you don't have any train now, because you don't have any infrastructures. So we need investment in the stuff which are sustainable. And the definition of sustainability, from my side, is doing stuff, product and service, which help for the future generation and be good for them, knowing what we have on Earth. And knowing that, for sure, we cannot do everything. but
Okay.
it's not directly linked to the fact personally have also a fair phone, not take plane and anymore and stuff like that, because it's not the problem. It's the problem, but we are not all alone the solution.
Okay, thanks, Thomas. Tom and Marina, what do you want to sustain in your lives?
For me, personally, carbon reduction is the most important topic. So, for example, resource depletion or sustainable resource consumption, these are also important topics, but for my personal opinion, not as urgent as carbon reduction. So limiting the climate change as much as it's still possible, which is not so much, is the most urgent problem, and therefore my focus. But of course, taking other sustainability issues into account is also important. But personally, carbon reduction is the overall most important topic.
Yeah, I was going to say that in simple terms, I think there's various planetary boundaries, not just in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, but also in terms of like topsoil quality and the health of our ecosystems. So it's about the ability of those life support systems of the Earth to actually continue long term for future generations. Now, but that seems abstract when you put it in the context of something like web design. And I think in like the work that we do in web design, like we're primarily focused on carbon because it's the thing, carbon and energy consumption, because they're the things that are most directly correlated with the work that we're doing. But obviously, if we look broader than that as a society, then, you know, websites are only just one microscopic piece of the sustainability puzzle.
There is a smell of something burning in the air. I would quote Greta Thunberg and say our house is on fire, but I think it's just something much more mundane that is around the corner here. Yeah. Okay, so if you see us escaping this room in a rush in a couple of seconds for the remote people, don't worry, it's just our house being on fire.
You need the sensors, but unfortunately, we didn't put any.
Maybe a question to Tom related to reduction of carbon emission. Some of us were wondering, like, you're talking a lot of, and we have seen through the talk of Google that videos are the main, like, consuming part in web design. Like, how do you mitigate the data consumption of streaming video, and like, is it sufficient, and how does it compare to other action that you undertake in web design, such as the one you presented this morning? And yeah.
Yes. So I mean, I think most video streaming doesn't happen on websites as such. Most of it happens for entertainment, whether that's through YouTube or Netflix or any other equivalent service. So there's things we can do in web design to reduce video consumption, which largely are around just using less video, because it's actually often not the best way of communicating a particular message. But from the entertainment side, I think there's again, it's a cultural challenge, and I think that from a design perspective, the best thing we can do is try to design the interfaces to, well, firstly, I should say, you know, there's an efficiency angle to the engineering, which I know, like, a huge amount of work is being done constantly improve the data efficiency of the actual systems. But from a cultural side, I think we need to be looking at the interface design and asking, how can we make these things less addictive? Because it's actually a lot better, not just for the environment, but for us as humans, if we spend less time watching YouTube and we spend less time watching Netflix, and things like auto-playing videos after the one that you've watched, and the suggestion engines that they build in and so on, are designed to make you want to constantly consume video, and they're very good at it. So I think the best thing we can do there is actually to look at more like the psychological aspects of why are these services so addictive? Why do we binge watch an entire series of something on Netflix? Why do we spend hours watching really pointless videos on YouTube? That's the psychological question more than a technical question, and I think that would be a key area to look into.
Just to add, maybe the question of pornography has to be asked there.
I would also add to that, a few years ago, we looked into the use time of devices and how long a TV is used, how long at that time mobile phones were used. And we thought, okay, somewhere all these numbers were increasing, but somewhere there must be a stop. I can't use products longer than 24 hours a day. But what we see with smartphones is that we, especially with smartphones, we have parallel use. So use time of the single device is increasing because I'm watching Netflix and twittering about it at the same time and all this stuff. So yeah, I think we should also take that into account, that the way we use products and technology is also changing with the ability what they can do.
So you can use technology more than 24 hours a day. A question maybe, Marina, precisely on the life cycle assessment. You're talking about the fact that you are collecting data, like real life data. Are these, like, in terms of the Fairphone life cycle assessment, are like real data in terms of life, like how long do users use Fairphone? Do they actually repair it? Are these real data collected and included in the hypothesis you make for the life cycle assessment?
Actually not. We used as a basic lifetime 3 years of use, which is, yeah, a realistic number, but more on the upper side of the use time of a smartphone. But we use that because that has kind of been established as kind of technology overall assumption. I think Apple set the standard with that, assuming 3 years use time for all of their devices. But we also did the eco-design study for smartphones last year here at Fraunhofer IZM for the eco-design directive for the EU. And there we analyzed that smartphones are used between 2 and 5 years, more or less. And I also work in a group where we specifically work on the topic of obsolescence and why do people stop using their products and so on. And for the Fairphone, one aspect is that the Fairphone gives the ability to repair a device and thereby extend the use time of the device. But the ability of the device is only one aspect, and the more driving aspect is the view of the person. So it's more, the use time is more strongly affected by the persons buying Fairphones, which are already environmentally interested and therefore repairing the device, than by the ability itself. So overall, product repair is not so common anymore. People are more interested in buying new stuff. A lot of time, many times because the products offer more features, but also in a lot of cases because they just want to buy something new. That's a driving thing. Buying, having new, showing it around. And across all ages. It's not just. It's often said, yeah, young people want to have the newest smartphones. It's across all ages that people want to have new stuff, and that's something we have to work on, I think.
Yeah, and some of us noticed that in the end, Fairphone's business model is not exempt of buying into this because they have like 3 generations of phone, and like the later ones include like bigger screens, cameras with more advanced features. So I guess they sometimes have to, like, do you think they could like get free of this business model, or is it like something you have to do as a smartphone company if you expect people to buy your products?
It's both. So having a better camera and so on, yeah, you have to be appealing, and if you just are working at the low end, then the people buying low-end phones are also people who are really budget sensitive. So that's an area where Fairphone can't really be active if they want to also address the topic of ethical raw material acquisition, etc. On the other hand, the decision, for example, regarding the Fairphone 2 having a bigger screen compared to the Fairphone 1 was the problem that they were such a small company. So they had to, they can't dictate which kind of displays they buy. They have to see what's available for them in China. And I think that's the situation there, that the bigger players defining the market for all the small companies, because only what is produced for the big companies can also be bought by the smaller ones.
Yeah, that's interesting. In particular, I like this change towards looking at business models that is coming up here right now. So, for example, at the level of the European institutions, there's currently a discussion for actually implementing a ban on personalized advertising. So what I'm interested in is understanding how you would see the internet to evolve if we go for such business models, if we go for paid infrastructure, or if we say we prioritize equal access for everyone and go for public internet infrastructure. Google question classically, but I think it's also interesting for all the others of you. So I'm wondering how you would see your companies evolve in such a context, or if you would see that beneficial in a societal sustainability context. Go if you want.
Honestly, I'm not thinking. I don't think about that. Honestly, when I see what we have as a public offer, I would be more scared than reinsured about what you're talking about. You know, it's. I don't think that we will go there one day. And today, what we are doing as European, we are doing very good. We have a very good awareness of our future, of our planet and stuff like that. It's not the same everywhere in all the continents. So what we are doing, we are forcing people to improve and to do better things. The downside of it is that the same stuff that was happening in these continents are moved away in other continents where there's absolutely no control and no requirement. So we need to be aware of that. You know, putting a tax on CO2 emission was probably a very good wake-up call for big players. But what ended up is that we closed the steel industry, but we still produce steel, and we still continue to do so. So I think we need to look at the global impact of these decisions versus that not in my garden, and so I'm safe, because that's not what will save us at the end of the day.
More perspectives on regulation and European economies? I'm sure you have opinions there.
I think we need to decide to have stronger regulation on environment, but it's very difficult in the context of economic growth and the way that economy is organized today. Because companies are saying, okay, if there is more rules, I will fire people, and then it gets trouble in the society. So this is a global problem, because we need stronger rules for our environment, but we also need to take care about social consequences. And so maybe I would like to advocate upon like public internet, because it works. In fact, I don't know exactly how it works in Belgium, but we have seen that for transportation, rail transportation, a public authority of transport was more efficient than private. For health, public is more efficient than health. For water supply, it's more efficient. So I can imagine that for the internet, it would be more efficient from an economic cost perspective as well. So, and if it's public, it's easier to put regulation on it.
Maybe that's a question the other can react on, like, what would be your opinion on a public-run ICT? Like, Do you think it's something desirable? What do you think the consequences would be?
It's interesting you should say that, because I was just thinking that I'm sure it might not be a popular thing, but there would be real value to society in having a public search engine. Now, I'll admit that a public-run search engine would probably struggle to ever be as good as Google. As we've seen with, the technology of Google is incredible, and it's got huge money behind it. So that there's the commercial model is in some way supporting the technology. But I think if we look at it purely from a social perspective, having a search engine that is actually there for the people to help them find the information they're looking for without being bombarded by adverts, without being distracted by adverts, I think could be really powerful. I doubt it would happen, but and if it did, it would have to be as good as Google. Otherwise, people wouldn't use it. I think that's the bottom line. But if somebody could pull it off, I think it would be an incredible public service.
So regardless of the advertising, do you think we are better off with Google deciding what we find, or we are better off with European governments deciding what we find?
Yeah, but
It's the same, huh?
Yeah, we will need enlightened despotism.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, maybe we just need an open search engine.
I think one of the main idea of asking for a public-run ICT would be like, since as it will run on tax, would it be more oriented towards people's interests, and like maybe it would be a way to re-enter like more democratically run ICT?
I think it's also a question. I mean, we also see the rising of populism throughout Europe, and I mean, government is not always for all people. So, I mean, I think there's also great risk in having public search engines and having only the government let you see what they want to see. I mean, yeah, we talk about companies having so much power on what people see and what they can decide on, but yeah, not all governments are good in such a way as well. So yeah, it's a great risk, I would say.
Yeah, maybe we just need a mixture of search engines.
I think we are slowly arriving towards the end. Maybe I have one last question, which would come back slightly on something that Marina said before, on the fact that as engineers, we often look toward like high-tech solutions to problem. And one of the questions the participants had was, would there be a way for industry and academia to collaborate to decide what we should not investigate? Like, what should we not research on? What should we not develop? And what do you think about this idea? How would you implement it?
I agree with that. I think it's important to have ethical discussion and to decide not to develop 5G or 6G for the mobile communication. But okay, this debate is quite complicated, since as a society we think progress is consuming more. And if we don't change this this collective objective, it's a very complicated discussion.
I think there are probably some things where a hard line should be drawn, such as developing new technologies that are going to help us consume more fossil fuels, for example. Those are probably areas where we just shouldn't be doing research, because we know that that's something that we shouldn't be doing. But I think, in many other areas, it's often a very, very grey area, and I think open debate is probably the most important thing around the ethical considerations, so that it's multiple stakeholders are involved and that those discussions are actually visible to the wider public, rather than things being kind of decided behind closed doors.
I think it's a question of responsibility as well, and also looking a bit wider to what we typically were educated to look at. So typically, you know that I think a logical businessman will tell you that if the solution to a problem is more expensive than the problem, I should live with the problem, okay? And that's kind of, you know, normal practice. And this is the thing that, by the way, I have to learn and embed into every new employee which is joining my team, because as engineers, as Marina rightly said, they want to fix everything with anything. And so we need to make sure that
it depends if you take the cost of your problems at the beginning.
No. Yeah, let me finish, please. So, and today the cost is a question of money. And then it's not only this. To me, the cost should be embedding the social interaction, the training requirements, the complexity of what you're proposing, and the energetic impact, and also the fact that you need to rip out all the infrastructure and put a new one. So I think today we need to start to tell to people that will be the engineers of tomorrow that, you know, don't only look at technical and money, but look at the broader scope of the problem. And this is the one that will dictate what you will do to make it better and not just fixing a problem.
Thomas, if you want to say something?
No, you finish with what I wanted to mention, because actually it's not a problem with the way of thinking of people, even in the financial area. It's just a problem that they didn't consider everything. If you consider the whole price, a cost for everything, then you can still manage approximately with your profit and your development. The main problem is that you didn't take into account all the costs of recycling, of your basic infrastructures, of your goods, of what you use. And so, of course, when you deal then with your equations, your financial market equation, you have a right solution, because you don't have the good hypothesis.
Well, I think there are also a lot of things on which we don't really know how to put a price tag on them, right? So like material extraction in the global south is something that is typically not considered in all the damage we do there. So incorporating that in a life cycle analysis, understanding to what extent we can put a price tag on what we call in new terminology ecosystem services is something that we just haven't researched yet.
Yeah, but we can start to approximate it at least a little bit, and then it will fulfill the requirement to get a more sustainable society. Yeah. And even what we know today it's maybe not the true of tomorrow. Also, it has to be taken into account. We cannot say that what we think which is sustainable now will maybe be not sustainable tomorrow. But yeah, we'll need to deal with that also. We are not sure that everything that we are discussing now, maybe something is wrong a little bit, and it will change everything.
Guillaume?
Yeah, my point is that this discussion is very politically situated in the neoliberal ideas, because one of the hypotheses underlying this discussion is that all the forms of capitals can be substituted one to each other. We know that in some point this is not true. Even if you have the whole money of the world, you cannot get dinosaurs back. So all the forms of capital cannot be substituted one to each other. So there's still a problem, even if you have an accounting of the whole life cycle. You cannot restore what has been destroyed. You cannot pay to get petrol back under the soil and etc. So this is more complicated than that, I think.
Yeah,
Noemi
sure.
is looking at me. So we are actually coming to the end of the debate. So we have like 5 minutes left, and I'm wondering maybe we can do a last round, a summary, a final statement from each of you, 1 minute, 1.5 minutes, and then we can conclude this thing here. Who wants to start?
Maybe my question would be to the participant and to everyone would be, are we sure that building new technologies and innovation and all the technical progress we have all working for, etc., is really the way for our well-being? And maybe can we imagine being happy with less technology, less producing stuff, and like something like this, and to define other criterions of happiness and well-being? And okay, that's my question.
Yeah, can we define business models that deal with less production but more happiness somehow?
My final thought would be really to reflect on what type of society we want to live in the future, and is that society about everything being more high tech and having more advanced vehicles and computers and gadgets and consuming more stuff, you know, being able to just buy more stuff and consume more stuff, or do we want to like reassess what matters in life and actually see if we can use technology to enable the things that really matter and enable people to live healthy, happy lives in a simpler way, but rooted in quality of life being the thing that really matters?
Frédéric, can you imagine advertising networks to be used to make us buy less stuff?
I don't know. I'm not the one driving AdWords first, but probably what I think we see, which is important to know, is that, you know, it's one of the part of our business. The other part is running cloud, and that's to me a big bet on the future for Google. We have been entering that cloud market a couple of years ago with really little impact on the global cloud business. Cloud business is growing. This is something that you know is a way to move away from company-owned data centers, company-owned servers, and stuff like that. So I do believe that we try to do it right in terms of usage, because when you're a big player like that, you can't do an after job. It needs to be professional, and so in terms of effectiveness and effective use of equipment, that's helping. Okay, so to me, this is where we are going. This is what I'm seeing. I believe that for the ads and all of the rest, everyone has the choice to turn them down. How many people do that? Huh? So it's a question. You need to know that it needs to have some money to run the search engine behind and offer services. But at the end of the day, we have our choice to make as well, and no one is forced to use the products either. Huh?
I think I would disagree probably, because like Google is by now so pervasive that pretty much all of us have no other choice in using these services. And I would really want to see an advertising tomorrow morning that tells me drink more water.
Not sure it's in his hand, but
It's probably not in your hands, no.
It's probably linked to your search. I'm sorry.
Okay, more final statements. Thomas and Marina.
Yeah, so to conclude, yeah, we'll say that beyond the concept here of sustainability, we have a responsibility for the next generation, for the futures. But it's also quite paradoxal is that, yeah, we think also no from our side, our viewpoint, but there is also more poor countries in the world who want to use smartphones or want to use technologies which consume. And actually, say, okay, we'll consume less. We know for sure that most people, I think that half people in the world maybe want to consume more. And the problem is that if we cannot develop the product and the service which consume less for them, so they consume more by having the same level of life level than here, yeah, we will talk, but we will not change everything. So the responsibility is also for all the people in the planet, in the world, and also the people who want to have a better life.
Yeah, I think that resonates with something I think Julia said yesterday, but I think indeed people in developing country will have to increase their quality of life in the upcoming years, but I think it's more up to consumers in our country, I mean consumers or other bodies, but to reduce the way we use ICT and other resources.
Yeah, but then if we consume, if we help them through sustainable things, sustainable services, it will grow. It will be less a problem than if we stay with all the servers, with Google, with consumes a lot and stuff like that. So maybe we have to be more smart in the even if it's a word which is maybe used in many places, but yeah, more smarter in the way we develop things to help them also, because yeah, we think about ourselves, but what we develop for ourselves will be used for the other people in the development countries.
And for us as well.
Yeah, true, but yeah.
Marina?
Yeah, I'm a little bit pessimistic, honestly, because every time we work regarding the consumer side, all our studies show that just the majority of people just are not really so ambitious to change, and even people who are ecological conscious or interested are really reluctant to change behavior, reluctant to change consuming styles, etc. And therefore, I think we need two things. One is more stricter environmental legislation. So some products should just not be on the market anymore. There must be some prices on CO2 and other stuff. So really more strict regulations. And the other thing is we need to make it easy to make the choice. I think there was a book I read which was called, it was in German, but it was Ecological Routines. It should be the routines for the person, the more easy choice to use a sharing alternative or public transport instead of buying something. So every time they make the choice, the ecological version has to be the more accessible ones. Otherwise, it will not be used by the wider community.
Okay, thank you very much to all of you for accepting to take part in this debate and for debating respectfully. And it was really nice to hear all your different point of views. I think you all have very different also realities related to your work, so it's not always easy to conciliate point of view, but I think we had a really nice discussion. So we'd like you to all applaud our 5 speakers. And I think that leads us to coffee break and to the end of the day, actually. Finally.
Yeah, end of the day, actually.